Okay, I think let's kick off. Welcome, everyone. What a great turnout. These workshops have been amazing. We've had record number of turnouts. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Daniel from Telmar. We've been hosting these workshops. I'm head of strategic partnerships, hence building relationships with all of our data suppliers as we're data neutral, and we load over 10,000 databases in 85 countries. We've been showcasing and having webinars all over the world. We have links up to these different webinars on our website. We're having one for the Middle East affluent. We've just had one for Asia. And this is our third in our series of BrandMapp webinars from Wi-Fi. So the team on the line today are Brandon, Master of Storytelling, Stuart and Julianne. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat line. Stuart and I will answer them as we go along. And then we can also engage at the end of Brandon's presentation. So welcome to all the Telmar clients and non-Telmar clients. Marsha, our revenue director, will be following up with all of you, sending you this video, the presentation deck, as well as trying to make some time to demo our new insights and statistics packages. But firstly, we're going to hand over to Stu. He has some very exciting news.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. So many clients on board and potential clients. Great to have you all with us, and thanks for joining us. Jen, thanks so much for this opportunity to you and your team. It's been a great collaboration. It's been outrageously successful. Literally hundreds of delegates on each of the 3 webinars. And thank you also to everybody that entered our competition, and that's why I'm butting in here quickly before Brandon speaks. So we had a BrandMapp brand profile competition, and most people don't know that BrandMapp is brand, media, and product profiler. That's the acronym. So for the last 10 years, profiling brand customers versus your competitors' customers is kind of what we've done best. But we sprung the idea when we started with these 3 webinars to give one lucky person a brand profiler for free in this little competition. So it's a 62,000 Rand prize. And we chose the winner yesterday, and that person will get a full brand profiler literally across all 277 measures in BrandMapp. Crafted by and presented by Brandon de Kock, who we're going to hear from now, but just for your brand. So it really is one of our key products. It's a strategic roadmap for your brand, and as we like to say, it will give you a competitive advantage. So as I say, we drew it yesterday, and I'm delighted to announce that our winner is a young intern from Densu in Johannesburg, and his name is Khomotso Telani. I haven't been in touch with Khomotso yet, but congrats, Khomotso. Awesome. I had a little sneak preview about the man from Annie van Rensburg, and we're delighted that this young is a up-and-coming young insight star. So we're really looking forward to working with you, Khomotso. And then for everybody that didn't win, the good news is that our business development director, Julianne Bell, will be in touch with. She's going to drop everybody a note with a whole lot of special offers on both data and brand profilers for you guys. And that's it. So congratulations, Khomotso. And now over to Brandon. Has been elevated from the director of storytelling to the master of storytelling somehow this morning. So enjoy the final insight session entitled How to Navigate the Shifting Media Landscape. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brandon de Kock.
Oh, thank you, Stu, and thanks, Jen. Hello and good morning, everybody. Thank you again for giving up some of your valuable time. And as always, hopefully what I can share with you today will it's either going to lead to very deep insights that will help you with the rest of your day and the rest of your life, or at worst, it'll make you even more interesting at your next dinner party. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Hopefully you can all see that. Today's topic is media. So for those of you who didn't know, we've already done 2 of these. The first one was just on sort of general trends and shapes and size of the market that we talk about, that I'll describe to you in a moment. And the second one is all about headspace and what's going on in people's sort of hearts and minds. So those are still available. And some of what I'm going to say today might you might almost have benefited if you've watched the previous 2, but you can still see them. Anyway, I've tried to make this a reasonably coherent presentation for those of you who haven't seen any of the other 2. So let me just get the housekeeping out the way. For those of you who don't know what we are, Stuart and I and Jules work in our company is called Wi-Fi. This product is called BrandMapp. We're not per se a research company. We come out of the world of marketing and media. Stu and I started this business just short of 10 years ago, while the 2 of us were working at Ramsey Media. You might remember it. It was one of those old media giants publishing car and getaway and wine and golfer magazines. And that's where the genesis of this business was. So we're a consultancy, and we use this unique kind of independent data set called BrandMapp. So what is BrandMapp? Once a year, we go out and we try to ask as many people as many questions as we can about their behavior as consumers. So obviously, these are the sort of the buckets. This year, we had an unbelievable response. 33,000 people completed the BrandMapp survey. So it's our biggest sample ever. Obviously, people had a bit more time on their hands in lockdown. We produced what we think is a really important data set for reasons that I'll explain to you in a second. But effectively, these are the buckets, right? So it's everything from who are you and the usual demographic stuff through to your behavior as a consumer, all the way through to, crucially, your media consumption. So to date, we have talked about everything up until the last little section that you can see there. So this is the first time that we are lifting the lid a little on the media interrogation and the media behavior. So I do feel a little bit like I'm a stand-up comic trying out new material for the first time. So I'm quite keen to see how it all goes down. But this is all about media. Okay, so what does BrandMapp actually describe? This is the famous way that we like to look at South African society. So we earn about 2.7 trillion rand every year. And if you divide the adults in South Africa into household income bands, you discover that 70% of adults are living in households earning under 10K a month. Then there's the middle class, about 9.5 million adults living in households earning between 10 and 40. And then there's this tiny little group at the top, the top enders, we call them 5% of the population, who earn 40,000, who live in households earning 40K a month or more. So what's important about this is that there's a lot of research that does an incredibly good job of painting good, rich pictures of the bottom of that triangle. Some of the establishment stuff and some of the stuff that's hopefully coming out before the end of the year will allow those of you who are interested in the bottom of the triangle to understand what's going on. We're interested in the top part of this triangle. That is the BrandMapp universe. Okay, so it's only 12 million out of the total 40 million adults. We think they're pretty important because they earn 85% of all formal income. So the reason this is important is that always during one of these presentations, somebody comes in halfway through, they hear me say something, or put a chart up, and they kind of go like, oh, that's impossible. It's impossible that that percentage of South African population, and then we have to remind them that it's actually only 10K. So if you see anybody doing that in the chat room, please want to remind them that if you arrive late at the party, you're not allowed to complain about the lack of welcome cocktails. Okay, so just remember, everything I'm about to show you, it's about the top of this triangle, guys. That's the BrandMapp universe, and we think we'll stand, well, not think, we will stand toe to toe on anybody in this country when it comes to understanding the consumer behavior of this group of people. Okay. Why we're very chuffed this year is that we managed to resist being in field until the first quarter of 2021. So that doesn't mean we've got a before and after COVID view of the world, but what it does mean is that we've got what I'm trying to describe as a before and after impact view of the world, right? So whatever is going to happen with COVID and lockdown, I think the economic ramifications, the consumer behavior ramifications, man, we're going to be feeling the rumbling and the earthquakes from the impact of comet COVID for probably a really long time to come, especially in this country. But there's definitely something that happened with the impact. There was an immediate sort of response. Consumer behavior changed in many ways. In some ways it didn't. And that's kind of what we've been able to measure with this BrandMapp 2021 data. Is we had a view before the world started coughing, and now we've got a view after impact. So the point about a comet striking the way it did is, this is potentially an extinction level event. And for a lot of brands and a lot of products, we've just seen the test kitchen close down. If South Africa's #1 restaurant has gone extinct thanks to the effects of this meteor. So a lot of industries, a lot of brands had a lot of trouble during the impact time. And media obviously is one of those things that could become extinct, or parts of it could. So it reminded me of this beautiful term coined by Bo Sachs, and he was doing presentations towards a couple of years ago about the big magazine companies, and he referred to them as the giant Newsosaurus Rex. The idea of this massive creature that was almost destined for extinction, because it had become too big. You can't sustain yourself as a massive beast on this slightly changing world that the magazine media found themselves in. And it's a bit of an old joke. I rolled this out in presentations a couple of years ago, because what I was trying to explain, though, is that the misnomer here about extinction level events in the dinosaurs is that, did you know the dinosaurs didn't actually go extinct? There's now sort of a lot, almost every scientist and archaeologist and paleontologist and all of these people will all agree that there is a clear line that you can now draw between the supposed extinction of the dinosaurs and these feathered little fellows. This guy's name is almost impossible to pronounce. I think it's Archaeopteryx. It's that thing. Basically, this is the precursor of birds. They've found this actual connection. So that means that when you look out your window and you look at one of the 10,000 odd species of bird that are flying around planet Earth, that is not what you're looking at is the supposedly extinct dinosaurs. The point here is that we live in a time where, after this impact of this meteor, after radical sudden change, I think that we're going to land up in a far more fragmented media landscape than ever. And it's not like that is a new thing. That is a trend that had already started. And I think the impact of the COVID meteor is just going to exacerbate that situation, right? So there's a big lesson to be learned from birds. It's going to be a running analogy for the next sort of half hour or so. Sticking with birds, one last thought on this matter is that, there will also in this new world be some birds who, you don't want to learn particularly good lessons from, because when it comes to media, and I do speak with some level of authority. Stu and I have been in media our entire lives. Media's got in general, some media players have a bit of a habit of being able to stick their heads in the sand and pretend that everything's okay when they know it's not. And there's no point in doing that right now. The catchphrase I would send it to you is that, fight and flight and even freeze, even stopping just for a moment to see what's happening. Those are survival strategies. Self-delusion is not a survival strategy. Okay. So what our job is to try and help clients and brands and marketers and media owners and whoever we can to understand how not to be self-deluded and how to try and create survival strategies using intelligent insights. So the data is one thing, understanding what the data means is another. Okay, so hopefully I'm now going to jump around and show you a little bit of stuff that we know about media that we believe has happened in this, what we can call the middle class and up of South Africa during the course of the last year. Where does everything sit right now? And what are the insights that we can extract that are useful? So the first thing I want to share with you is that we think that this is incredibly important, this whole media thing still, because if you look at what interests people in life, South African middle class and up South Africans, we measure this every year. We ask a simple question: which of the following pastimes or hobbies are you interested in? And that's the top 10. It's been the same kind of forever. It swaps around in order, but it's pretty much the same. This year we see travel being this thing that is much more interesting even than music. But look at the top 5 and consider the fact that 3 of them are completely reliant on media as a platform in order to be able to deliver these things, So it's kind of important that we have a robust media sector. It's important that if these birds are out there flying around, we want them to be well fed and we want them to be surviving in flocks and in small nests and in all sorts of ways. so that we can at least satisfy ourselves as a society and be able to feed the interests and the hobbies that make us feel more human. So media is super important. The first area of discussion here about COVID and what happened is, I do think it's important that we have a deep understanding of exactly how things shifted. So it's one thing to kind of go, yeah, everyone's, using Zoom. But what's more interesting is to kind of go, can we quantify that? Can we actually try and come up with metrics that allow us to go, is this one of those things where people are saying, everyone's turning vegan, when in fact it's only 3% of the population? Or is it a real, is it a meaningful, impactful percentage of people that are behaving in a certain way? Okay. So the question, have we all gone streaming mad in the last year? Okay. Well, the first piece of this puzzle is understanding what happened with connectivity. So what you see here is a trend from 2019, 2021. Simple answer, how do you connect to the internet at home? So if you look at 2020, that would be the year before COVID, 53% of people were connecting with their cell phone. So that doesn't mean they're using their cell phone to access the internet. It means they're using their cell phone as a connection at home, like hotspotting, and you had 53% of people doing that. You had only 20% of people using fiber. But look what's happened during COVID. So fiber usage has gone from 20 to 34%, and this is in the entire middle class and up. When you look at the top enders, that number goes sort of skyrocketing. It's more like 50%. The point here is that while we were all in lockdown, there were guys in vans driving around, putting sort of fiber to the home into every single suburb they could sort of virtually see. This was a stat put out on the 25th of March. So Vumatel is the biggest fiber to home supplier in the country. Their revenues are up 43%, 43%. I mean, it's insane. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. So this in itself, just this idea that really fast fiber to home, fast connection, 5 members of the family all being able to watch what they want in their own time. This is a far cry from the world where we all huddled around the TV at 8 o'clock on a Saturday to watch Dallas. This is a different world. Everyone can be doing their own thing in the way that they want. I think it's a massively important technical thing that happened during lockdown, the spread of fiber and connectivity. And we see the results of that in something as simple as this. So 2020, last time around, how many people are using a smart TV? We registered it at 11%. Post-COVID, 24%. 24% of middle class and up South Africans saying they've got a smart TV of some sort or another. This is we can see this behavior, this kind of like this tech uptake in different ways and places. I always look out for Takealot's top products. This is their absolute latest one, like June 2021. The number 1 selling product is still television sets. We're all looking to upgrade our TVs, then Xboxes, and then very disappointingly, the air fryer, which will be the subject of an upcoming webinar. In fact, I'm thinking of doing an entire conference on air fryers, which will center on the idea that it's not a fryer. Anyway, let's move on from that. The point I'm trying to make here, smart TV uptake, just 100% reflection of something like the connectivity increase. And remember, this is middle class and up South Africa. When we talk about data costs being prohibitive, that's very much further down the income stream. For these people, data is available and it's relatively affordable. Okay, so how does this play out? Do we see other signs of changes in sort of digital behavior? We ask this question always, which of these activities do you regularly do online? And there's a whole bunch of them. So this first slide is showing you, the things that we were already doing. So 2020 in white and 2021 in yellow. So there's no trend story here. We're still listening to music, watching movies, reading articles. Job search gone down a little bit during COVID. Well, I suppose there were no jobs. I mean, there were no jobs to be had, but pretty much a static picture, There are a few places though, which were quite large areas of activity where we've seen significant shifts. So video conferencing we've never measured before. We put it in for the first time this year, boom, 32%. So for those of us who are on this call, that might seem like a bit of an under-indexed number, but I mean, that's 32%, including, you know, all of the students, all of the retired people, moms and pops and everybody. That's 32% of the total middle class in our population are saying that they're using video conferencing. Watching TV up significantly, making phone calls up fairly significantly, and taking online courses up, you know, 8%. So what we're talking about here is that there's a lot of alternative digital consumption. You know, when you think about something like video conferencing alone, just think about this webinar. The number of people I know who have watched this webinar as a stream, as a, you know, they've gone on, clicked on the link in a week's time. And when they're watching that webinar at home in the evening, it's taking the place of some other activity that they used to do. So all I'm trying to show you here is that there is an enormous amount already of digital activity going on, of consumption of stuff, you know, and it shows all over in the survey. Oops, sorry. Sorry, it's 3 degrees centigrade. My fingers just froze to the keyboard in Cape Town. We see all sorts of things all over the place. We've got 62% of adults saying they listen to podcasts versus 55. So even something like podcasts, which was already, you know, it's quite a, it's a going concern, man. The world of podcasting and the world of audio on demand, it's fast rising. YouTube, we've been measuring it always, 58% of adults. You know, so this number, the 60, those of you who may have seen a presentation that I did called Tipping Points a while ago, about 60-40, you know, the moment you hit 60%, remember, you're well over the 50% line. You're on the way to something that's going to tip and become a tipping point, or it's already gone over the tipping point. We see that with podcasts, we see it with YouTube, just an enormous amount of content being consumed. And when it comes to actual streaming services, so this was kind of the chart we were all waiting for. How much has our behavior really changed in measurable terms? So in 2020, that's what we measured as streaming services regularly used by middle class in South Africa. 41% Netflix, a large number. Only 27% of people said, I don't use any of these things. Look at Spotify, 13%. So this is before COVID. What happened during 2020 with all of this fiber connectivity, with the boredom of staying at home, with the requirement for more and more on-demand content is that it's an extraordinary picture. These kind of increases are, you know, this is the reverse of extinction level eventing, right? This is flocks of birds evolving out of that thing. 41% becomes 61%. That's a 50% increase in Netflix. We know that globally, these kind of numbers are relative. I think the total Netflix growth was actually 40%, something like that in Europe. These are massive, massive increases. Look at Spotify from 13 to 20%. You know, 7%, it's huge. It's huge. These are 50% increases. DSTV now, very importantly, you'll see when we get to TV, something that explains that as well. But to go from 27 to 38% of people tapping into the DSTV now app, being able to really get television on demand, we're telling a story here, guys. And here's the story. You know, when something like Netflix effectively grows an iPrint by 50%, you've got to, Mike, I've copyrighted the word, by the way, iPrint. It's a brand new media term. That is a huge thing in itself. But just imagine now the accumulative effect of all of these facts and figures that I've put on the table, where you've got many more people connecting far more often on numerous devices and multiple listening occasions, all in the same spaces where there used to just be one occasion. You've got massive uptake of all of these services. And back to my ostrich idea, I do think we would be delusional in the media business if we didn't believe that has to have had an effect, and a significant effect, on media consumption in general. So what sort of effect has it had? That's the big $1 million question, which I'm going to give you some of the answers to. On top of all of this, we also need to understand that the existing, some of those pre-existing media challenges, you know, the effect of social media is well, it's undeniable. So we need to take that into consideration as well, because social media is just media, right? It's taking up people's times as much as anything else. So, you know, I love the idea that we've actually got a whole language created around the 290 estimated, or somewhere near 300 people who have plunged to their deaths in the last 2 years. While it's been recorded, trying to take selfies at extraordinary places, you know, selfie deaths, that they actually call it selfie-cide now. It's suicide, but not really on purpose. It's where you kill yourself trying to take a picture at the top of a mountain and fall off. Anyway, a few less influences we can probably do with. So let's have a look at social media in general. You know, how's it growing? What's happening? This chart here is showing you the usage of social media by age brackets. This shows you starting at 35 to 44 and going up. So I've left off what I would call the Gen Z and the millennial cohort out of this. I'll show you that in a second. The picture you're looking at tells a beautiful story, right? We all know this. We know that Instagram, visual platforms are more for younger people. Twitter is going to be the uptake of the newcomers in the social space is going to be by younger generations. TikTok, not surprisingly, you know, is popular with the very young. And this is kind of a typical picture that we have seen in the past for the entire age cohort. So, you know, if this is what it looked like last year for the youngsters, but look what happens and look what's happened in the last year. And it's literally happened during COVID for that millennial group. So the red bar is the youngest cohort, 18 to 24-year-olds, and the gray bar next to it is 25 to 34. It is official that 2020 is now the year that Instagram took over from Facebook for under 35s. So you're more likely to find millennials on Instagram than you are on Facebook. It's a huge shift. Last year was the first time that for the 18 to 24s, these things were level pegging. It just shows that, you know, in a very real way, I do believe that Facebook is in many ways old media now. It is old media. Instagram is new media. And, you know, given the speed with which things are going, Instagram's probably going to be old media quite soon as well. But just imagine now, look at that 86% and look at that 75 in the context of everything that I've just said about sort of available hours in the day and how people are using it and what's taking up the eyeballs and earlobes. You know, it's this kind of stuff that's having a huge effect on younger media consumers. You know, these young people are spending, where they used to spend an hour maybe watching an MTV 20 years ago, now they're spending an hour swiping through reels. You know, and that's just a reality I think that we have to face. Okay, so what's happened with all this big social media usage is, and so super importantly, I also do think that one of the things that we see coming out of the data for the behavior during 2020 is that because we were doing things more often, we got better at them. Okay, so if you look at online shopping, for example, our perception and our ability to shop online increases exponentially. We become much better online shoppers the more we shop online. And I think the same thing kind of happened with digital media during the course of 2020. For many, many reasons, it's the year the scales fell from our eyes. So we ask this question in a simple way: which of these news media do you actually trust? And that is the difference between 2020 and 2021. Effectively, 2020 was a year where I believe, thanks to probably quite a lot of Donald Trump, quite a lot of what happened in Europe and globally with media, I think people lost a hell of a lot of confidence in media in general. You can see the effect on radio and TV. The traditional leaders in the trust and newspapers have always been the leaders in the trust stakes. But in leading up to COVID, we had websites sort of pretty high up there. Facebook was very high. Twitter, you know, people did have some faith. Well, all that's happened in a year of probably the most, potentially life-threatening fake news. That was the year that we've just come out of, right? Potentially life-threatening fake news. These levels of trust have plummeted. So it's not like, and remember, this group of people we're talking about is middle class and up. So they are reasonably well educated. It doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make here, there is a big job that needs to be done by digital media to win back people's trust when it comes to like fake news and all of that kind of stuff. And it's definitely had an effect on the whole media landscape. Okay, so big job ahead of us as people in the media and people who love media. We've got to try and earn back the consumer trust, right? Okay, that's all the landscapey stuff. I'm now going to dive into the three sort of main sectors that, if you want to call them that, of the traditional media landscape as we understand it, and try and show you the big overriding things of what happened in radio, TV, and print. And let's start off with radio. So, you know, who's tuned in on what actually happened to radio during the 2020 year? So the first thing is straight up and down total. This is all 33,000 respondents. We say, how often do you listen to radio? And that is the result, 2020 versus 2021. So it's pretty obvious that listenership went down a little bit in some ways. It looks like a few times a day's, you know, dropped quite a lot, at least once a day, and the others have picked up. But let me tell you what I, you know, as an analyst, I look at this and I go, given everything that I've just shown you, given all of those options, the fact that radio effectively is showing about a 10% decrease is unbelievable. For me, that shows like the most robust platform or channel or media platform. Like, I can't believe it's only 10%. I thought this number would be closer to 25%. You know, when you consider all of the challenges that that radio faces, it's a huge fight. It's a big red ocean that radio's in, and we're measuring the dip as only 10%. So the fact that we can take sort of bank about radio this year is that still almost 60% of middle class and up adults listen to the radio every single day. It's still just a massively important and robust part of the landscape. I'll tell you a little bit more about radio later, but you know, one of the things that we see, radio is definitely an area where those birds are starting to evolve out of the big mega dinosaur creatures. You know, small radio stations, even if they're bought up by old radio stations, that are allowed to operate the way they want to and allowed to keep functioning as almost independent units or totally independent ones. You know, the HOTS and the Voomers of this world are that they're having an amazing time at the moment. And I think it's because there's this huge appetite for radio still in this country. If anybody is to blame for things like radio listenership not, you know, increasing or looking or dropping, it's probably because it's the youth to blame, and we are a very young country. If I put a millennial kind of filter onto that radio listenership, so boomers on the right-hand side, Gen X, millennials, and then I know everyone calls them Gen Z, but for a bunch of people who are completely obsessed with themselves, I really think we need to start calling them Gen Me. It's mine. You don't have to embrace it. But look how much less likely, in fact, you know, hardly ever, 36% of those youngsters are hardly ever listening to the radio. So I'm sure when the BRC results come out, which we're all waiting for with a level of excitement before the end of the year, I'm sure that they're going to show the same kind of habits on a trended basis. That you know, younger people is definitely the challenge for listening to radio, and a lot of them used to obviously listen to the radio in the car on the way to work or with their parents. So what's happened there? What's happened to the listening occasions? This is such an interesting a chart for me. The last time we measured radio listening was actually in 2019. So the white bar here represents 2019, not 2020. We didn't measure this in 2020. So this is sort of going back to, this is a real pre-COVID metric, in the sense that the last time we asked this question, nobody had even thought of life being any different. This behavior had probably been the same for years. And when we start off looking at what's happened in the morning, so we didn't ask driving around during the day last time around. Look at that number, 28% of people ticking the box saying, I listen to the radio driving around during the day. It's a huge number. 63% in the car on the way to work or college or school. It's even more than before. And at home in the morning, basically the same percentage. So at the outset, almost nothing has changed in morning radio listenership. But where the real changes come is clearly what happens in the afternoon or later. And again, I'm not sure whether the guys at BRC are going to be trying to delve into this. We're certainly going to be doing work on this in future surveys. But I'd like to unpack this behavior a little bit more. I think there's an instinctive thing in us that says this has to do with people either not working full days anymore, or it has to do with schools being closed, or whatever it's got to do with, remember that this is an aggregated behavior after sort of schools were opened up again. So something quite radical has happened here. This is a fairly radical change in behavior. It means that it means we have to ask, is it a trend? You know, is this going to stick around for a while, or is this just a passing storm? And when things get back to whatever normal is going to be, this will return to normal. I must say, if you go back and look at some of the previous presentations we've done, there's definitely a feeling that we have that middle class in South Africa wants to kind of get back to behaving the way it did. How long that's going to take, we don't know. And obviously this whole traffic mobility issue, working at the office, schools being open, everything being back to normal, will have an effect on this. But I still think we need to be a little bit cautious, or not cautious, but realistic about the fact that there's quite a lot of changed behavior here, and I can't see it not having a bit of a lasting effect. So there's definitely a change in behavior. That's what's happened in radio, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that changes and morphs over time. Okay, let's move on to a couple of things about TV. So, you know, who's eating all the popcorn? What's happened that we know about with TV? So for the first time this year, we actually asked a frequency question with TV. How often do you watch television? Very simple. You know, our job at BrandMapp is to try and get sort of big metrics. We're trying to make sure that we start the question in the right place. So we don't do last quarter hour, last 3 days, whatever. We just ask big questions like this. We're trying to measure big consumer behavioral metrics. How often do you watch television? Wow. Half of these people are watching at least 2 hours of TV a day. That's a lot of television watching going down. TV is quite clearly still a big part of people's lives. I put a generational filter on that just to see what is going on, and it's kind of a bit more complicated than you'd think. So again, this is, you know, Gen Z, the youngest people are the white column, the older people, the boomers. So your shape and your transitions here along the ski slopes are from younger to older. So if you look just on the right-hand side, once or twice a week, hardly ever, it looks like younger people are more likely to be less frequent viewers. But then at the same time, when you look at more than 4 hours a day, there's a group of those young people and millennials who are more likely to be higher users. So if you're going to use if you're going to use BrandMapp as a tool on Telmar, and you're going to try and start digging in and creating segmentations to understand who's watching TV, when and where and how, there's definitely some good work to be done in this generational space. Age, for us, age is almost the single biggest segmentation tool that you can apply in the context of South Africa and the middle class and up. Male, female is interesting. Levels of income is interesting, but it's the age thing. When you put age filters onto the 12 million people who make up the middle class stuff in South Africa, that's when the really interesting pictures start to show. What do we know about actual sort of channel and program behavior? Well, we know that last year DSTV found 500,000 new subscribers, and it's definitely had an effect of some sort. This is the 3-year trend. SABC, which is, you know, it's the least on demand of the television players, and we see them taking a bit of a dip in the middle class and up. ETV a slight dip, but DSTV we see like a 10% increase, which I know we don't use a BrandMapp as an audience quantifying tool, but sometimes, you know, the big numbers allow us to make some sort of intelligent guesses to see what we're talking about. So, you know, if we're talking about 12 million people, a 10% increase is about 1.2 million people, and we know that DSTV found about 500,000 new subscribers. So 500,000 new subscribers, about 1.2 million adults in total. Sounds about right, you know. Bottom line, DSTV just increased its sort of footprint, certainly in the middle class and up. Interestingly, they also lost 100,000 premium subscribers, or what I like to call non-sports fans, because I think it might be the only reason to still have a premium subscription. But super interesting stuff going on in TV. There's no doubt, though, that this whole television world has been massively impacted by all of that stuff I showed you at the beginning. So if you can imagine the impact of Netflix growing by 50%, how much of an impact did that have on those 100,000 people who went, do I really need to pay the 900 Rand for the full bouquet? You know? When it comes to some of the kind of behavioral stuff, I think this is a really beautiful insight. So we asked people what programs they watch, and these are some of the major categories. So movies, sport, music, you know, not any, there's no story there, guys. It's not a, there's no story to tell here. The stuff that we watch, the levels have remained pretty much the same. Obviously, sport has kind of dipped a little bit because there was a little bit less sport to watch, and that's probably a residual effect. But the 4 categories that are missing from there are documentary, general entertainment, lifestyle, culture, news and commerce. And I think it's really fascinating because we have been wondering what the effect of isolation would be on people. So, you know, what is the effect of staying at home more, of maybe caring a little bit more, of taking more of an interest in the world around us and the people around us. And it's interesting that kind of content seems to be, the appetite has increased quite significantly. Documentaries, finding out what's going on in different parts of the world, being a little less insular. You know, there's nothing like being closed up in a room to make you wonder what the rest of the world looks like. So I just thought that was a really fascinating little, it's almost a psychographic coming out. Okay, that's TV. And then, you know, the last one is, you know, the old dinosaur itself, you know, the Jurassic Park of print. What's happening in the Jurassic Park of print? Well, newspapers, we think, are still a relatively strong. You saw how strong the trust measure was on newspapers earlier. I guess one of the reasons for trusting newspapers with news could be that newspapers by definition don't actually print news anymore. So it's harder for them to print fake news because you already, by the time it gets printed, will know whether it's fake or not. Anyway, newspapers, we think, are still quite a big player in the whole media landscape. This picture's been getting sort of, I call it, worse and worse over the years. If you look at I don't read newspapers at all, it's gone from 20% in 2019 to 22 and then 29. So not a great year last year for obvious reasons. A lot of the newspapers stopped publication. But there's a sort of a good luck story to be told in this, and that is that even right now, 29% means that 70% of adults are still reading newspapers. And what is quite clear is that people will still read newspapers, but they don't really want to pay for them. That's where the I don't buy newspapers but still read them comes in. So we just saw that racking up and up and up and up over the years. What does it mean? Well, there are some people in this country, and there's some brands that actually took this to heart over COVID and went, well, let's do something about it. So I'll show you a really interesting graph. This is a graph that shows you what has happened to one particular newspaper. And if you look at those two figures, the newspaper launched in September 2020, selling 18,000 copies. And by February 2021, they'd upped that ABC circ number to 32,200. So, you know, you can't tell all the newspapers in this country that the dinosaur is extinct. Who is it? Well, it's Daily Maverick. So technically, they didn't sell. It was an on-request publication that you claimed with your Smart Shopper card. And they used this as a launch moment. Obviously, I think now they've actually converted. So the free model at Pick and Pay is over. They launched it. They got a lot of people into the newspaper itself. But far more importantly, do you know what the best effect of this is? Is that Daily Maverick's online audience has increased by 250% in the last year. That 2.5 times is the growth in their unique users. It's an extraordinary result and just a really excellent example of a small, agile little bird in the media game doing something different and coming up with a great new idea. So these guys must really be smiling. I'll tell you who else must really be smiling now. You know, every time I see a picture of Koos Becker, he's smiling. Even when he's not smiling, he still seems to be smiling. And I've never met Mr. Becker. I don't know him at all, but I'm not sure if he's a genius. But I tell you what, he's definitely a visionary, because I remember what happened 20 years ago with the whole kind of the makeup of the old Naspers and what's happened to it. And there were all these crazy ideas flooding around. There was a 22nd floor with like 60 people on it working on apps. And we all went, geez, that's pretty like avant-garde. So why is Koos smiling? Well, I'll tell you why he's smiling, because I think 20 years ago, when Koos Becker set up that whole digital network and funded it with probably a tiny little piece of his retirement fund, but you know, he probably had enough. I'm sure it didn't hurt him too much. But he funded this thing because I think he saw a future, and he probably saw a day like today where somebody like me would be putting up a chart like that, showing you that of middle class and up South Africans, 67% say that they visit news24.com. 67%. It's just a radical footprint. What does that mean? Well, this is where things get really interesting, because I think that Koosbeek is smiling because he's actually quite good at maths. So let me show you an equation that, that will lead to those kind of smiles. So News24 currently has about 19 million unique users a month, okay? 19 million. It's quite a lot of people. It's almost half the adult population of South Africa. And he knows that 0.2% only, 0.2%, so that's 1/5%, will give you 31,000 people, okay? And what is 31,000? Well, 31,000 people is the number of digital subscribers that they have got ever since they put the paywall up in the middle of lockdown. And 31 times 75 is 2.3 million rand a month. 2.3 million rand a month, okay? That's not bad turnover before you've even taken an advert from anybody, okay? So the advertiser-funded model, there's something else going on here that would definitely make him smile. But you know what? That's not all. And so, and the point about this is that the 19 million, in some ways, is a dinosaur already. That digital online audience who go into News24, it's kind of the dinosaur. The 31,000, that's the evolved bird. That's the new little remnant of the dinosaur. It's much smaller, 0.2%. But I tell you what, I would rather have those 31,000 eyeballs than the 19 million. You know, that's a proper little audience, and it's worth 2.3 million rand a month. But kyk net hierso julle. Watch this, okay? So while the English-speaking world was obviously half a step behind, in 2014, what they did was when they launched the Netwerk 24 bundle, so this is getting all of the Afrikaans titles digitally in one go. They started that in 2014, and while no one's been watching, sneakily, they've got 70,000 subscribers to sign up at 99 rands a month. Do you know what that equates to? 6.9 million rand. Million rand. So for the English speakers, it's million rand. It's the same thing. 6.9 million. If you add those two together, what you land up with is this. They have created, using these massive digital audiences and converting parts of it, without selling an advert, that's 120 million rands worth of revenue a year. You know, it's a beautiful thing. So the old model, the dinosaur, has been evolving in certain ways. You know, that's what we think's happened in the newspaper world, and will continue to. So keep watching the newspapers, keep watching them for what they do. Magazines. Magazines are really interesting because, you know, we were in the industry, and believe me, these charts bring me no pleasure. The greatest years of my life were spent as a magazine editor. The greatest stories I've ever had published were published in print, in magazines. So it hurts me to show graphs and charts like this, but we saw this coming a long time ago. Look at, I still don't buy magazines. Look at, I don't read magazines at all. It was in 2019 that we consulted with all of our media friends in magazines, and we said, guys, watch out, tipping point, 28 plus 12, that's 40%, man. You've hit 40%. You've hit that, you're approaching the tipping point. And when it goes over the cliff, it's going over the cliff. So what happened in 2020 already, it went from 12% non-readership of magazines to 17. So that was falling off the cliff, okay? What happened last year? Well, unfortunately, the herd of lemmings just fell off the cliff, and they've kind of gone over the edge. So magazines, it really was a sort of a deep impact extinction level event. And as I am famously am quoted as saying, you can't unfall a lemming, guys. So the big dinosaurs, those Newsosaurus Rex kind of magazine entities, I'm just not sure that it's viable anymore. What is viable? Well, I tell you what, this magazine business that I love so much, that a lot of people know a lot about in this country, I really, really do think that if you look at global trends, if you look at the trend for the last 10 years, this idea of those small birds being able to break away and fly free and live them as tiny little entities, and just a lot more of them. We think that's what's going to happen in magazines, and it's already starting. I try to get hold of the guys at House and Leisure. Now, House and Leisure is a title that we've tracked for years as being really important to middle class and South Africans. I couldn't really get hold of them, but I know that they are doing quite well, having been taken out of a media publishing house with all of those shared cost overheads and shoved into a design agency. One of the examples I know very well, and it's appropriate given the small bird quote. This is an editor of two small magazines who gave me this quote. I said, "How are things going, Mike?" He said, "Well, despite the doom and gloom, we're blown away by advertising support. Revenue's more than doubled, and our ability as a niche publisher to be agile has paid dividends." Never a truer word spoken. It was spoken by this man. It's a very flattering picture of himself. This is the picture that he himself posts. His name's Mike Finch. Some of you might know him, Finchy. I mean, Finch, the irony is not lost on me about him being an agile little bird. But Mike has been the editor of this magazine and of Runner's World for a very, very long time. They were both chucked out of the Media 24 stable, I think. And Mike decided that he was going to team up with a guy called Paul Goddard, and they've got a couple of other salespeople. It is a tiny little nest of highly experienced magazine people. And what they've done is they've managed to take this thing, extract it from the dinosaur, and make a little bird that's flying just beautifully. Just on 8,000 circulation, 100,000 Facebook followers, 12,000 on Instagram, 24,500 newsletters, 18,000 UUs, and that's just on bicycling. On SA Runner, they're doing the same thing. And they're running the whole thing from, it appears, from Mike's podcasting studio at home, So it's possible to create these little birds, and we think that this, if there is a big story about where media is going, this is the area where we're going to see it really happening. So I'll leave you with this idea that, what is the next big thing in media? Well, someone once, it's one of my favorite quotes. In our dystopian media future, the winners will be the ones who saw on-demand as an opportunity and not a threat. The reason it's one of my favorite quotes is that it is actually one of my favorite quotes. I'm on record as having said that in 2005, which is quite a long time ago, when we were still working in the magazine media. And the thing is, it is as relevant now. In fact, it's probably more relevant. Because we think that what's going to happen as time goes on is this world of media will continue to fragment. And ironically, the next big thing is just going to be a whole lot of small things. We're going from the dinosaur world to the world of birds. And that, if you're in the business of planning for media, if you're in the business of trying to help clients, what you need to try and do is identify these birds first and foremost. So if I leave you with one thought, it's like, if you're going to go to the world of birds, or Bird Eden in Plet, you're probably going to want to have a bird guide of some sort, and think of BrandMapp as your guide to that world of birds. That's what we can be for you. We can hopefully show you how to navigate some of these fairly complex landscapes, and help you understand even deeper than what I've showed you about what this rich world of media in South Africa is all about.